Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we are ready to begin with tonight's lesson, tonight's live class that is being taught to get us out of our anxiety and into Passover, 6 life lessons, 6 life skills on the Seder plate. Stories are very important. Stories help us reach out over centuries. Stories give us the ability to teach our children, to give them the feeling of what we are experiencing. And stories are important. But how many ways are there to tell a story? How many ways are there that you can tell a story? So the obvious way to tell a story is in words. And in the story that we tell in words, the Seder is no exception. In fact, the main mitzvah of the Pesach Seder is v'higadet levincha, to tell the story to your children. And that is exactly what we do on the nights of Pesach. We tell a story to our children. Yet there is another non-verbal method of telling a story. There's ways of telling a story non-verbally. You know the joke, I've said it before, it's a great joke, of this couple that gets into a fight. I guess they were quarantined for too many days together, and they get into a fight, and they're not talking to each other. They're giving the silent treatment. So the man, he has to get up early in the morning for a flight, and he's afraid he's not going to wake up. When the alarm clock goes off, he's afraid that he'll sleep through it, and his wife will just turn it off because she normally wakes up before him. So he leaves a note on the bed, on the pillow for his wife: please wake me up when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. And then the man goes to sleep. He wakes up. It's 9:30. He freaks out. He slept in. He missed his flight. There's nobody going to catch the flight. The flight already took off. He's going to miss his meeting. He's fuming mad at his wife. He's about to start to scream at her. And then he notices that right there on the side of the bed, on the side of his pillow, there's a note from his wife. Let's move this back a little bit. Okay, so anyway, there's a nonverbal method of telling the story. And that nonverbal method of telling the story is very much on display at the Pesach Seder experience. There are many, many things on the Seder table that are critical in telling the story to ourselves and telling the story to our children. What we're going to talk about tonight is this, the Seder plate. I will get into the shape of it and all that in a few minutes. Let me first say one more introduction. And that is that perhaps the greatest challenge of today in telling the story of Pesach for ourselves and our children. Thank you to all those on Facebook that are commenting with the ha-has. I appreciate it. The greatest challenge facing us when we tell the Pesach story is being able to experience the relevance and the importance of the story that happened then to us in our lives today. It's very hard. The only way to appreciate the relevance of the Pesach story to us in our lives is by us understanding not only the body of the Pesach Seder, but also the soul of the Pesach Seder. You see, everything in life has a body and a soul. It has its form and its matter, whatever words you want to use. All of us, we have our body, we have our soul. And so too, the Pesach experience, the Seder that we're teaching our children, it also has a body and a soul. The body of Pesach are the rituals, the laws, the details, the structure of the night, and how we present and how we teach. The soul of the Pesach Seder is its inner meaning, is its significance, is the message that it has for us, not only historically and culturally, but the message that this story has for us internally, emotionally, psychologically, how this story is meant to teach us to become better people and better at who we are meant to be. And so what we are going to do tonight, when we try to learn how to tell the story of Pesach non-verbally, simply by placing objects on our Seder table, we're going to talk first about the body of the Seder table. We're going to first talk about the details and the rituals and the objects that we place. And then we will talk about the soul and the spiritual significance of the Seder of the Seder plate. So the first thing we do, Pesach night, we come home from synagogue or our family comes over. Of course, we have to do all this year we're not going to hug and kiss. We're going to greet our family from a distance. But after all the welcomes and everyone says hello and everyone finds a seat by the table, if it's a house like mine where there's a lot of people and it's crowded until everyone finds a seat, okay, everyone sat down. Before we open the book, before we make Kiddush, before we start the process, the first thing we do is we open up our Seder plate. We take the plate, we put it on the table, and we begin to make the Seder plate. Now, the Seder plate has 8 different parts to it. The first thing is the matzah that goes underneath the plate. There are 3 different matzahs that go underneath the plate. And then there are the objects, the shank bone, the egg, the maror, the charosas. We're going to talk about each one in just a second. Now, there are various customs how to arrange the Seder plate. There's different ways to how to do it. And here we will follow the structure of Rabbi Isaac Luria, who will tell us the Arizal about how to do it. Thank you to all the comments and all those that are watching and thanking us, and my family is good and Khan is good, and thank you. Let's start with the matzah. The matzah is the object that goes on the bottom of the Seder plate. The matzah is on the very bottom, the centerpiece, so to say, of the story. Now, I'm going to get to the spiritual significance of the matzah in a second, but on a very basic historical level, if you go to the British Museum today, you can actually see loaves of Egyptian bread that are preserved in the tomb of some noble that was from the times of Egypt. And it looks, surprisingly, it's preserved. It actually looks like round hand-baked shmura matzah, which people ate by their Seder. But it's thick. It's not a thin matzah. It's much more thick. The reason being is that rich people ate well-cooked dough, and it was only the slaves, the poor people, who did not have a lot of dough, number one, and didn't have time to let the dough rise, that ate the thin matzah that was able to be baked much quicker than the regular bread. Hence, when we make the Pesach Seder and we describe the matzah, how do we first describe the matzah? As a lechem omi, as the poor man's bread. The bread of affliction is what we say. And really, I wish I had a piece of matzah here to show you. I unfortunately am working on getting matzah. I've ordered several cases of individual packs of 3 packs of matzah to give to the families that will need for Seders. For myself, I'm still working on getting our suppliers out, what we're going to get, B'ezrat Hashem. So I can't show you the matzah for a visual show and tell, but you all know what matzah looks like. It's a poor man's bread. It's a bread that's baked very quickly. It's a bread that's easy to take with you. Now is not the time to share the story about the Shevitz and the machine-made matzah that began with a rabbi in Cincinnati for people that were going on the gold rush to the wild, wild west, and why they were taking matzah with them. Fascinating history for another time. The point is, matzah is a poor man's bread. It's the bread of affliction, the food that's eaten by a slave as he's rushing to get something to eat before he runs back to work. However, this very same matzah, that is the bread of affliction, that's the bread that was eaten by a poor man, is the very same matzah that is eaten by the Jews as they're running to their freedom. The very same matzah, in the same Seder night, we say matzah zoom. We'll talk about this, God willing, in the class in a few weeks from now. This matzah that we eat, why do we eat it? Because the dough of our forefathers didn't have a chance to rise. Until it was revealed to them, the King of all kings, the God Almighty, and he redeemed them from Egypt. He took them out. So the very same matzah that reflects on poverty, on slavery, and on affliction, that is the very same matzah that reflects on freedom and our redemption from Egypt. That's for the matzah. Now, on top of the matzah, we put the Seder plate. You all see the Seder plate. You put the Seder plate down. And the first thing that goes in the Seder plate is the zroya, the shank bone. I must say, getting the Seder plate out of storage was not that easy. It was buried like on the bottom somewhere, but we got it out just for you. The shank bone, the zraya, is to remember the Korban Pesach. We don't actually eat it during the Pesach Seder. It's purely symbolic. It is there to remind us of, thank you, Terry. The shank bone reminds us of the main paschal offering that was brought by the Jewish people in the land of Israel when they had a temple, even in the desert. They would bring a Korban Pesach, the main meat, the main dish of the Pesach Seder that all the people sat and ate together. Now, there's nothing that we do in Judaism that does not contain within it some level of symbolism and reminding us of our holy Beis Hamikdash, our holy temple. One, probably the most famous example of this would be at a wedding. Just today, 2 hours ago, one of the many phone calls I had today, one of them was with a lady whose son's wedding is scheduled in May, and she's worried on what to do, and maybe they should reschedule the wedding, and what does Jewish law say about changing the date of a wedding? When you go to a chuppah, even the most secular chuppah, if you will, probably, I guess I haven't done any secular chuppahs, but I believe that even the most secular of chuppahs include the breaking of the glass. Why do we break a glass by a chuppah? The reason is not just because we want to warn the husband that this was the very last time that he'll ever put his foot down, and it's not going to work out too well if he puts his foot down again. It's not just so that we can say mazel tov on broken things. The reason why we break a glass is zeicher l'churban, as a remembrance of the destruction of our holy temple. So too, when we sit by our Seder table, although we're celebrating our freedom, although we're telling a story of Exodus, we can never ever forget the temple. We can never ever forget the fact that we're in exile, that we no longer have a holy Beit HaMikdash, a holy place where Jews from the entire world can come together to feel united as one in serving our God and serving our King in heaven and being one with Him. Hence, we have a zroa, a shank bone, and we don't eat roasted meat on Pesach. It's actually forbidden to eat roasted meat because that would be like the Pesach offering, which we don't want to touch. That is the body of the shank bone. On the other side of the plate, we have the egg, the beya, the egg. What does the hard-boiled egg remind us of? It reminds us of another offering that was brought in the temple during the holiday, the Korban Chagiga. There was an obligation on Jews when they came to the temple 3 times a year on the 3 holidays of Pesach, Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot, that they would bring, when they came to the temple, a Korban Chagiga, a peace offering, a celebration offering in honor of the holiday. So the egg reminds us of this other offering that would have been brought if we were to have a table. This egg is eaten during the Seder. It is not a formal part or a formal blessing, but at least the custom is that after we finish eating the matzah and the maror and all of that, we then dip the egg into the salt water, and we eat that as the beginning of our meal together with the fish course. Okay, that's the hard-boiled egg. I want to share with you a beautiful message of the hard-boiled egg, although it's not the body, but it's one of the most beautiful thoughts, and I share this all the time, almost every year. I love it, which is that most vegetables, when you cook a vegetable, what happens to the vegetable? The vegetable gets softer. Take a potato and cook it, and the more you cook it, the more soft it gets. Take a eggplant, whatever you want. You cook it, it gets softer. The only exception to the rule is a hard-boiled egg. The hard-boiled egg, when you put it into the boiling hot water and you put it under pressure, not only does the boiled egg not begin to deteriorate and get mushy and get soft and get weakened, but the exact opposite is true. The egg gets stronger. The egg gets more powerful. This is the story of the Jewish people. When you put us into boiling hot water, not only do we not get weaker, not only do we begin to crumble and to fall apart, but like the egg in the boiling pot of water that gets harder and stronger, the Jew is resilient. The more we put us in the water, the stronger we become, the more we're able to survive and to strengthen ourselves. Then comes the maror. Middle of the Seder plate, right in the middle, we have the maror. What is the maror? The bitter herbs. So the reason why we eat the bitter herbs, I'm sure every single person knows, is to remember the bitterness, the harshness, the difficulty of the Jewish people in the slavery which we endured in ancient Egypt. But just like I told you about the matzah, that the very same matzah which represents slavery and the poor man is the very same bread which reminds us of our redemption that was so fast that we didn't even have time for the dough to rise. The same is true with the maror. Do you know that the ideal food for maror is lettuce? Yes, the ideal substance, and you go to a Seder, is you have a little bit of the bitter herb, but it's ground up and it's put inside a lettuce container. And this might surprise some people, but the reason why we put the lettuce as a maror is because the iceberg lettuce actually shows the same idea of this relationship between slavery and freedom, which is that the leaves of the lettuce are not bitter at all. The leaves of the lettuce, many salads have lettuce, not bitter leaves. In fact, they're crisp, they're sweet, they're good. However, where do the leaves grow from? The leaves come from a green-white stalk. And the stalk of the lettuce, that is very bitter, which is the same exact message. The leaves are sweet. The leaves are great. The leaves are a delicious salad, if you like salad. But the source of the leaves is this bitter white stalk, which is bitter. And so too, freedom is only appreciated if you first experience slavery. A child who grows up in America and is given everything that they ever wanted on a silver platter doesn't appreciate the beauty and the importance of being free. A person that was in slavery, a person who understands that my life is not guaranteed, who understands that, we have to appreciate our blessings, then they appreciate the freedom much more. Like this year, we're all going to be cooped up in our homes and we're limiting our interaction with others and limiting who we see and how we go out. When we're able to finally reconnect again in a physical sense, we have great appreciation for it. Next comes the charosas. The charosas is the mud, so to say. It's made out of wine and apples and pears and nuts, and there's many different recipes exactly how to make the charosas. There's no actual requirement. Primarily nuts and apples and wine. Reminds us of the mortar that was used to make the bricks by the Jews that were slaves in Egypt. Another beautiful message, the same message that I just mentioned a second ago about the maror and the lettuce, which we also said about the matzah, is also true about the charosas. The charosas looks muddy. It reminds us of Jews making bricks in the mud in slavery. And yet you taste the charosas. What does it taste like? It's sweet. The kids love it. The charosas is delicious. Why? Because even though the charosas remind us of the slavery, when we put it into our mouth, it has a sweet taste. And that is the sweetness of freedom. On the other side of the plate, we have the karpas. We have the vegetable that we dip into salt water. The vegetable could be a potato. The Chabad custom is to dip the salt water. The Chabad custom is to dip an onion into the salt water. Again, there's no right or wrong. Whatever you do is fine. The most important thing is that should be a vegetable on which you make the blessing, ha'adama. Just a very important detail. When you make the blessing on the vegetable that you're going to dip into the salt water, you have in mind the maror that you're going to eat later on, which is also a vegetable, which we do not make a blessing ha'adama on. No, Mark, unfortunately, there's no minyan tomorrow. And then we have, on the bottom, we have the chazeret, which is another form of, we have the chazeret, which is also the maror. This is the maror that is used in the sandwich. Let me explain it now because it'll be important later on as well. In the times of the temple, Hillel had a custom that he would combine together into one big sandwich, the matzah and the maror and the meat of the Korban Pesach into one big zeichel mikdash. So we take the second pile of lettuce with maror is called chazeret. That is used in the sandwich, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And that is the body, the technical details, the symbolisms that are being non-verbally told at our Seder table. However, all the symbolisms that I just explained have beautiful messages and they're nice things, and you cook the egg and it gets harder, and the maror is sweet leaves, but they start from bitter white stalk. Nice stories, nice lessons, beautiful thoughts, but they have no personal relevance in my life. They don't seem to contain any personal message for me that I need to internalize in order for me to have in my life. Therefore, we are now going to get into the soul of the Seder plate, the soul of the Seder plate as described in the words of the Arizal. The Arizal is a holy Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the holy Kabbalist who lived in the city of Tzfat. And the Arizal writes in his Seder as follows. So actually, I just heard this Rebbe, when he their table, the Rebbe, besides for having a Haggadah in front of him, the Rebbe also had a printed book called the Seder of the Arizal, of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the way it was written down by one of his students, Rabbi Shabsai. And this is like one line of prayer, and then the entire page has a blessing. The entire page are different variations of the names of God that are described in the thoughts, in the meditations of the Arizal, on this one line, on this one verse, on this one blessing in the Siddur. Twice a year, the Rebbe would use this book with the Kavanot, with the meditations of the Arizal, when he would go to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and he would go to do the Seder on Pesach. So let me share with you now, for the next half hour or so that we have together, the words of the Arizal describing the spiritual significance of this Seder plate. I'm going to read, I have a translation in front of me that I printed out. I'm going to read it and then we'll go through it together. In the words of the Arizal, arrange the plate, the Seder plate, on the table by taking 3 matzahs and placing them one on the other. First, the Israelite. So the lowest of the 3 matzot is that which represents the Jew who is the Israelite, like myself. The second matzah, the middle matzah, is the Levite. And on top of it, the top matzah is the Kohen. These are the 3 intellectual faculties of Chachma, Bina, Dat. In short, that's called Chabad. Stay with me for a minute, and I'm going to go back and we'll discuss this in detail. Let me just finish reading what the Arizal says. Above all these, on top of that, is a Seder plate. On the right, you place the Zeroah, the shank bone, corresponding to Chesed. So I'll say it outside. If you're familiar with, in Kabbalah, the different sefirot, the different emotional powers and the faculties of a human being, this will be very familiar for you. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, stay tuned and I will explain. The Zeroah on the right side is the corresponding to the attribute of Chesed. The egg on the left side corresponding to the attribute of Gevura, of discipline, of severity. The Maror in the middle, in the center, is Tiferet, which is the idea of empathy and connection. On the bottom, on the right side, below that, you place the Karpas. This side. On the left side, you place the Charoses, which is the idea of the mud, which represents Netzach. On this side, the Karpas is the idea of Hod, of submission and giving over to somebody else. On the bottom is a Chazeret, which represents Korach, which is used for the sandwich, which is Yesod. And the plate itself, this very plate, represents Malchus, which encompasses all 10 spheres. Before I explain any of that, I want to just point something out. If you notice the Seder plate, it is not in a circle. It's not in a circle. Many Seder plates that you buy, this is one circle, and it probably looks nicer from a symmetrical perspective to have a circle. But any Chabad and any Hasidic, anyone that follows the meditations of the Arizal knows that actually the Seder plate is exactly as you see it over here, with kind of like two segels. One segel and another segel. Represents Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod. Now let me explain. Very, very briefly, general, and then we'll go through them quickly. The human being is comprised of 10 sirot, 10 faculties. 3 are intellectual, and 7 are emotional. The 3 intellectual faculties are called Chachma, Bina, Dat. In short, Chachma is the idea, the concept, we explain it as a flash of light bulb. You know, you get that like light bulb on your head that like, ding, the idea pops up into your head. That is the idea of Chachma, the concept. You have a brilliant revelation of an idea. Bina, which is comprehension, it's the idea of figuring out an idea, analyzing it in depth, and thinking about it, and questioning it, and understanding it. That is the idea of Bina. And then you have Das. Das is the idea of knowledge. Not just where I have intellectual awareness of a concept, where I can explain to you something, but I actually know it because it's something I've experienced, something that's real to me. So you have Chachma is the idea, creativity, concepts. Bina is the details. It's the analytical mind, the details, understanding the specifics, etc. And then you have Das, which is the understanding of a concept in an emotionally relevant way. As a side note, so give me we'll pause for a commercial break for a second. Beautiful class. I highly recommend you join us for Secrets of. Anyway, that was just a side. So we have Das, knowledge, understanding something. These are the 3 matzahs on the bottom of the Seder plate. There's a very, very important message over here before we even get to the emotions. The emotions are on top. So imagine here's your Seder plate. You have the 3 matzahs here. And on top of the matzahs is where you have the Seder plate. These matzahs that are on the bottom, they represent the foundation of emotion. Emotions that are not grounded in intellect, that are not grounded on my thought process, are inherently dangerous emotions. Meaning, there are many people, many of us, that act on impulse. We just act on feeling without using our brain. I mean, we're all guilty of that to some extent. Probably not all, but most human mistakes originate from our emotions, acting emotionally, acting subjectively, acting impulsively, without allowing our brain to be in charge of our emotions. The very first message for us spiritually and psychologically for making the Seder plate is before you deal with any of your emotions, before you get to the right side of your arm and the left side and the side of chesed, the side of kindness and the side of discipline, before any of that, make sure you have matzah. First is the matzah. First is the chachma, and then the bina, and then the dat. I understand the concepts. I have an emotional investment in them. I'm making them relevant to me. Only after you have a foundation of intellect can you then have healthy, stable, proper emotions. It's a simple idea, but it's so important. It's something that we all have to work on in being able to not be like a ship without a captain. The emotions of the person are our ability to achieve. They are what will propel us, to motivate us. But just emotion, without being guided, without being steered, without being channeled properly in the right way, it's unhealthy. It's dangerous. That's where our mistakes come from. And that's the idea. The Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, when he was once making a Seder plate, Rashab said as follows. He said, now we have saddled the wagon. Now we have the foundation. The Seder plate is like the wagon, which will take us to where we need to go. Okay, so that's the first lesson for us on the Seder plate, the alignment and the harmony of brain and heart. First the seichel, first my intellect, first the matzah, and after I have matzah, now let's start to talk about how to translate this intellect into healthy emotion. So far, I hope we're all good. Normally at this point I would take some questions. Someone would argue with me. I get a chance to catch my breath, but okay. What's the first of the emotions? First of the emotions of a person is chesed. What is chesed? Just for 1 minute, I don't want to spend too long on the actual emotion. Is chesed? Chesed is kindness. Chesed is love. Chesed is my ability to give and to care and to share with another. What is the first object on the Seder plate? The first object on the Seder plate is the zroa, the shenkbon. The word zroa in Hebrew means an arm. That's what it means. Zroa is an arm. In fact, how do we describe the Exodus from Egypt? We say that God came bizroa nituya, with an outstretched arm. God came with an outstretched arm, really only the right arm, and with a mighty hand, and redeemed us from Egypt. So the outstretched arm that we describe from the zroa nituya, the outstretched arm of God, expresses our ability to give to others. And whenever we describe giving and sharing, it's always described as the right side. Hence, the right side of the Seder plate is the right side that has a zroa, because it's the side of giving that is the zroa. Obviously, to give is the first of all the 6 emotions. Why? Because without an ability to give to somebody else, without an ability to be aware of the needs of somebody else, then there's no emotions. See, intellect can exist in a vacuum. You could be alone in a room and have no interaction with anybody else and study the Talmud and learn something or meditate, and you could have tremendous brilliance and wisdom without having any emotional relationship with anybody else in the universe. Intellect does not require another person in order for it to exist. But emotions cannot exist in a vacuum. For me to have a heart, for me to have emotion, requires me being connected to you. It requires 2 people. So the very first of all the 7 emotions that we're going to talk about tonight is chesed, giving, connection. Only when I have an ability to connect to you, can you then have an ability to connect to me, can I have emotions. And so I want to share a short story that I actually just shared on Shabbos last week, but the vast majority of you watching did not hear me say the story on Shabbos, so it was last week, so we'll share it again. There is a rabbi living in Yerushalayim. Moshe Tzur is his name. He did not grow up religious. Moshe Tzur, I hope the sound is working. Moshe Tzur did not grow up religious. He actually was a very secular Israeli. His first exposure to Chabad was when he was in the Israeli army. He was out alone somewhere on Purim, and I don't remember where he was stationed, somewhere in the Sinai desert. And these Chabadniks, these Chabad rabbis, came all the way out to where they were stationed, somewhere far away from any society, with little shalachmonot baskets, gifts of food, and them a gift from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he came on Purim to uplift the spirits of these soldiers, the Israeli soldiers who were stationed all the way out in the middle of the Sinai desert, and they danced together, and they uplifted their spirits, and they read the Megillah, and that was his first exposure to Chabad. Eventually, he moved to Chicago. He got very involved with Rabbi Danny Moskowitz, Olav HaShalom, his social innovation. That reminds me, I wanted to say that tonight's class is being dedicated in the refuah shleima of all of the people that need a healing. Just on my head now, especially several rabbis that I know that have unfortunately gotten the virus. They, in every single human being that has become sick, should have an absolute, complete healing, totally, refuah shleima, and that no one else should become sick from it. Anyway, Moshe Tzur gets involved with Rebbe. He gets involved with Chabad, and he actually had several opportunities to meet with the Rebbe. One time, the first time he came to Yechidus, to a private meeting with the Rebbe, at that time he had absolutely no thought process of becoming a rabbi and being a community activist and being involved in the community. He was focused on himself, on his own spiritual journey of self-growth. That's what he wanted. He wanted to, that's what he needed. He grew up not religious. He was on a journey of spiritual elevation, on becoming a more Jewishly involved and more educated. And the Rebbe was encouraging him to get more involved as an activist in giving to others. And he was a little resistant. So the Rebbe asked him, I want to ask you a question. Why is it that the heart of the person, which is the most important organ of all of the organs in the body, the most important organ is the heart? Why is it that the heart of a person is not on the right side of the body, but it's on the left side of the body? As you know, Moshe Tzur already knew this, and we all know this, that in Judaism, the right side is considered more prominent and more prestigious than the left side. That's why when we make Kiddush, on Friday night, we make Kiddush holding the Kiddush cup in our right hand. When we make a blessing, we kiss the Mizrah, whatever we do, any mitzvah we do, it's always done with the right hand. So why is it that the heart, which is the most important organ of the body, and the heart is the part of the body that's meant to give and to connect to others, why is it that the heart is on the left side of the body, not on the right side of the body? He was stumped. Why indeed? And then the Rebbe said to him as follows. Because what is the objective of the heart? The objective of the heart is not for yourself. It's for you to give to somebody else. So when I say that I'm looking at you, your heart is indeed on the right side. On the right side of the person opposite you, on the right side of the person for whom your heart is intended. So beautiful. Your heart, said the Rebbe, God put your heart on the right side. The right side of the person for whom your heart is there. The right side of the Seder plate is the Zroa. Literally the neck bone, but it's the outstretched arm. The Zroa, the outstretched arm of God. Because the first thing, after we have intellect, of course, because love has to be built on intellectual understanding what's good and bad, etc. But once I understand, I want to care about someone, I want to love, the most important emotion, the beginning of all of the midot, is chesed, is love, is the right side connecting to somebody else. The important emotion, the beginning of all of the midot, is chesed, is love, is the right side connecting to somebody else. Thank you for all the comments. The left side of the Seder plate is the egg, the hard-boiled egg. What does a hard-boiled egg remind us of? As we mentioned briefly before, reminds us of the destruction of the temple, because it is a remembrance of the Karban Chagiga, of the festival offering that would have been brought in the temple every one of the 3 holidays if we were to have a temple still alive, still standing. So therefore, what does the left side represent? The left side represents Gevura, discipline, strictness. Now, we normally translate Gevura as discipline, which is what I just said, but it's not a very good translation because it doesn't really encapsulate what does Gevura mean. What Gevura really means is restraint, the ability to hold back, the ability to limit yourself. The right side gives, which is what we just described a minute ago about chesed, giving, the arm of God outstretched to save us from Egypt, to redeem us, etc. We describe God hugging us with his right arm. And the verse says, right hugs away, meaning restraint, boundaries. But unchecked love, unrestrained love, non-limited love is also not healthy. A good example for this is water. Water is compared to mayim. Water is compared to chesed. Water is compared to love. And for many, many reasons, water is the life of everything, but also because the nature of water is that it flows downwards. Meaning wherever you put water, the water will always flow down a slope. That's the nature of water. It will never stay up. It will never go up. It always goes down. That's the idea of giving. I'm always giving to others. And yet, even though water, lost the video, we're talking about the idea of the left side, which is the egg, Gvura, the water. So water is restraint. Sorry, so water is to give. But if you have unlimited water, if you were to have water, just imagine take a hose and no limit, no filter on the hose, just blast the hose. So have a cup, it's pretty empty now, just a tea bag inside, and you would blast the water inside. You know what would happen to the cup? The cup would fly away. The cup will break. The cup, the receptacle, can't handle an unlimited stream of water. Imagine you're trying to plant something. You're watering the field. Imagine if instead of the sprinklers, if anyone ever had a broken sprinkler head before, I'm guilty many times, what happens when you have a broken sprinkler head? Instead of the sprinkler spreading out water in little droplets all over the grass, you have one big burst of water, and wherever that lands, all the dirt that's there gets washed away, and you end up with a ditch, you end up with a hole. Not only is it not watering allowing something to grow, the exact opposite is actually destroying the dirt that is there. Love that is not limited, love that is not filtered, love that doesn't have a limit to it, a filter to it, actually can be destructive. Famous saying of Shlomo HaMelech, spare the rod, spoil the child. The idea that you need to have boundaries on parenting and on teaching. This is true in every single area of life. Every loving relationship needs to have its boundaries. Every single act of giving has to have its limit. And therefore, if on the right side of the Seder plate you have the Zroya, if on the right side of the Seder you have the giving and the love and the connection, the outstretched arm hugging somebody else, on the left side, you need a hard-boiled egg. You need to have the ability to balance, to limit, to restrain, to hold back, to make sure that the love you want to give is effective and measured according to who you want to give it to. Then we come to the middle. You have Gvura, and in the middle you have Tiferet, empathy. What is Tiferet? Tiferet is normally translated as beauty. Beauty also is a weak translation, although it's a technically correct translation. It doesn't really capture the idea of what we want to explain. What makes something beautiful? My shirt is white, it's clean, but it's not beautiful, it's plain white. Beauty only comes when you have a combination of different things together that make it beautiful. So, in order for anything to be beautiful, in order for something to be considered art, it has to have many different things combined. And the more you're able to integrate together, the more ingredients, the more colors, the more beautiful it can be. The idea of Tiferet in the middle is to be able to combine Chesed and Gvura together. You know what the combination of giving and restraint is? Compassion. Compassion. Rachamim. And let me explain why. To give means that I want to give you. It's not about you. I want to teach. We have a desire to share. We have a desire to give. So we on our own say, I'm going to give. Now, whoever wants to receive can come receive. Givura, which is restraint, on the other hand, is all about judgment. We always describe judgment as a side of the left side. Judgment is I'm judging you. Do you deserve it? Are you worthy of it? Will you use it properly? Will you take good care of it? And that's also important. Compassion is a combination of the two, where it's not just me giving whether you want it or not. I had a famous story of the guy that comes home one day and his shirt is torn and his face is scratched and he's all black and blue. His glasses are broken. His wife says, "What happened to you?" He says, "No good deed goes unpunished. I was trying to help an old lady cross the street." So that's beautiful. You wanted to help the old lady cross the street. But how did your glasses get broken? Why is your shirt ripped? He says, that old lady, she didn't want to cross the street. That is chesed where there's no receiver. I want to give, so I want to give. That's chesed. Whereas I judge you. Tiferet is that I'm giving because I want to give, but I'm giving to you because I understand what you need, even though you don't deserve it, even though maybe you're not worthy of it, I'm going to give it to you anyway. So I know who you are. I'm giving to you based on my understanding of you, but I'm not limiting myself. I'm not limiting myself to what you deserve or to what you earned. I'm giving you what I'm capable of giving, what I want to share with you. Let's talk about I hope that was clear. The greatest form of connection, of course, is rachamim, which is tiferet, which is the idea of being able to connect and to care and have compassion for others. What's the point of eating the maror on the Seder? So honestly, first of all, we eat the maror because we want to remember the bondage, suffering, and the bitterness of the Jewish people in Egypt. But is that the whole point? Can we compare the trauma of eating some bitter herbs at the table, back-breaking slavery and torture and abuse that the Jewish people suffered in Egypt? Eating the maror on a spiritual level, I mean, of course, we're remembering the story of Egypt, but the Arizal is explaining over here. But on a spiritual level, when we're eating the maror, what we're doing is we're arousing compassion. We're arousing rachamim. When we eat the maror, we are arousing both our compassion, divine rachamim, divine passion from above, that God should feel for us and we should feel for each other. Meaning, even when we're not living in slavery, even when we're not living in suffering and in bondage, we can never become complacent and take our freedom for granted, and we have to always have compassion for other people. We have to always care for other people, and when we don't take our blessings for granted, but we share them with others, then God has compassion for us. God has compassion for us. So this is the spiritual soul of eating the maror on Pesach, not just to remember the suffering of the Jewish people 3,300 years ago, but to arouse compassion within our own souls through the bitter herbs, to arouse tears and compassion and rachamim and tiferet for others, which in turn arouses the compassion of God from above for us. So far, I hope. Now come to the next thing on the Seder plate, the charoses. Charoses, the delicious mortar made out of the apples and the pears and the wine, represents the clay, the mortar that the Jewish people, the Jewish slaves, to make the bricks when they built the pyramids for Pharaoh in Egypt. Mortar, like cement, is known for what? For strength, for endurance, for the ability to withstand. I kind of jumped ahead for a second. What is the attribute, the emotional emotion on this side below chesed? Netzach. Netzach means endurance. Netzach is translated as victory. That's the translation. Again, it's a translation that doesn't capture the essence of the emotional attribute of Netzach. Netzach means perseverance. Netzach is about me saying, I want to give to you, or I want to do something, I want to accomplish something. You can emotionally want something and yet not have the actual drive to actually see it through. So how many times as parents want to do something, I want to share something, I want to give something, get around to actually doing it? It's difficult to get around to it. It's a little uncomfortable. It requires me changing my schedule. I'm supposed to be personal and vulnerable for a moment. I'm supposed to have a conversation with my children. My wife and I have talked about this, and we've agreed that we're going to have a conversation with one of our children. But, just thinking about it, this popped in my head, we haven't had it yet. Why not? Not because we don't want to. We want to. But it's going to be a difficult conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable to find time when other kids are around, and to make time and to do it in a private setting. For whatever reason, the emotional chesed that I want to give time to this child hasn't yet translated into reality. Because where I'm lacking is in my netzach. I'm lacking my ability to persevere and to carry through and to have endurance and victory in actually achieving that which my chesed, which my desire to love my child wants to do. It's a very, very big challenge that we all face. We all face. One of those emotions that we have to all work on. We have good ideas. We have desires for good things. Assuming that we have a healthy chesed, assuming we have a healthy feeling of love and connection and care for others. But to carry through on it, to carry through on Netzach is difficult. It's easy to allow the good ideas not to become reality. This is a spiritual message for us, a spiritual life skill on the Seder plate. Long story we talked about before. When you sit by your Seder table and you look at that mortar sitting on your, in a blob, sitting on your Seder plate, and you see that mortar that was used to hold together bricks to form big, beautiful pyramids. Think about in your own life. Think about where I have to overcome and persevere and have more netzach to be able to make my emotions actually come to. The Jews that were in Egypt, it says that the more that they were oppressed, the more that they proliferated. The more that they were oppressed by Pharaoh, the more children they had, the more that they became more. As a Jew, part of the story of the Seder, the symbolism of the charosas, is not just that the Jews were slaves and they were forced to make mud. That is not an inspirational story for us. It's not a relevant story in our lives. The story for us is that Jews who were being enslaved, despite slavery, despite the bondage, despite the suffering, despite the abuse, despite the torture, despite everything, they persevered. They continued to have more children. Not only not break them the suffering, made us have more. And this is how we need to look at the charosas at our Seder table. We need to look at the charosas and say, this is my reminder to overcome and to allow the best in me to be revealed from the most difficult moments. There was a group of businessmen. I can't remember who it was that were traveling. They were in Israel, and they met with a Holocaust survivor. I'm going from memory. I don't remember who it was, so I don't want to make up the name, but it was the Holocaust survivor. And he asks these American businessmen, he says, tell me, what is the lesson for us from the Holocaust? Quiet, and the one that says, never again. And this Holocaust survivor says, eh. And the next one says, to remember the 6 million, eh. Finally tells him as follows. I'll tell you the lesson of the Holocaust. The lesson of the Holocaust was that when we came to we were put into cattle cars, we were stuffed together in very, very difficult conditions. We were scared, we didn't know it was coming. We finally got to the camps, and there were dogs that were attacking at us, and the soldiers were beating us with their guns. They forced us into lines, and we were in operations, and then we were shaved, and we were showered, and we were put into these disgusting prison uniforms, tattooed with a number. We lost any sense of identity. And then they said to 3 people, this piece of wood will be your bed. And then they took one blanket, one thin little blanket, and dumped it on the floor, one blanket for 3 people. And at that moment, we saw who were the people that shared their blankets. To love somebody else is somewhat easy. It's somewhat easy to say, I want to give you, I care about you, I feel for you. But to actually take a blanket and share it with somebody else, to actually have netzach, to actually have mortar, which is the idea of glue, of sticking together, of being able to give myself to you in a real way, where I'll give you what I have, not just feel for you. That is a spiritual life skill of process on our Seder plate. On the other side of the charosas, we have the karpas, the vegetable. What emotion, for those that are familiar with the Sefirot, someone can post on Facebook, what is the emotion that is on the left side under Gevura? Under Gevura, we have the Midah of Yisod. Sorry, of Hod. You have Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod. What is Hod? Hod is translated as submission. Again, it's also not a good translation. Hod is about allowing myself to be connected to somebody else. Hod is about being the receptacle of someone else's giving. Just like Netzach, which is endurance and victory, is about me actually giving to you. Hod, in some ways, is even harder. Hod, or connection, is about me being willing to receive from you. Very different. There's many of us who are good at giving to others. We're good at being the giver. We're good at enforcing ourselves on others. But to listen to others, to receive from others, to allow ourselves to acknowledge that someone else has something to offer me that I don't have, that I receive from somebody else, it'll be a little bit harder. It's a very special life skill to be learned from the karpas. From this little vegetable, you take this little, whether it's an onion or a potato or a piece of celery, whatever it is that is your family custom, you take this vegetable and you dip it into the salt water. It reminds us of being humble, of being able to yield, of being able to give space to allow others to give to us. We go into the salt water. When we allow ourselves to be humbled, that's when we're able to have that balance between Netzach and running low on time. We'll go to the next emotion, which is Chazeret. The bottom emotion underneath Netzach and Hod is Yisod. Yisod is translated as bonding, as connection. Bonding, or as real empathy, is about truly becoming one where I am bound together with somebody else. See, Netzach is about me giving to someone else. The first three are about emotions. Chesed is about me caring for someone else. Gvura is me judging someone else, setting boundaries on somebody else. And Tiferet is feeling compassion for that person. Netzach is me actually following through and giving to the person. Hod is allowing myself to be pulled back, to allow myself to receive from the other person. And the bottom is Yisod, where me and you are bonded together as one. In the Kabbalistic metaphors, it is the part of the body that unites male and female. It's about the ultimate bonding of two different people coming together as one unit, as one whole. That's Yisod. That's the idea of bonding, being truly united and one with the person that you love. Meaning you can have many emotions, but they're scattered. They're not integrated. They're not in one. What do we use this bottom of the Seder plate, this chazeres? You know what we use it for? We use it for the sandwich. We use the second maror. The first maror is eaten as maror. But the second maror is eaten bound together between two pieces of matzah. It's the idea of bonding, of becoming together, of an experience where I truly unite me with you, with each other, and of course with God as well. And this is another very important life skill, which is the idea of empathy. The ability to integrate my willingness to give to you, my willingness to receive from you. Because in a truly healthy relationship, in a truly bonded relationship, we do both. If we're only giving somebody, that's not healthy. If we're only taking, not healthy. In a healthy relationship, we're giving and we're receiving. There's Netzach and Hod, which build into Yisod, into bonding. And finally, we come to the actual Seder plate. The actual plate itself, which is Malchus. What is Malchus? So Malchus is kingdom, but Malchus really is the idea of the queen. Malchus is the idea of a kingdom that has nothing of its own. What is the power of the king? The people. A king without a nation is not a king. A king without a people is not a king. Malchus is described, we have limited time, like the moon. What is the light of the moon? The moon has no light. The only light of the moon is what it reflects from the sun. Malchus has nothing of its own. Malchus is an empty vessel. Malchus is an empty receptacle. Malchus is filled with everything it receives from the top 9 sefirot. All your intellect, all your 6 emotions, your kindness and your discipline and your bonding and compassion, it all comes together into the vessel, into the receiver, into Malchus. And then Malchus is able to become the mouth of the person to give it over to the next person. This is the idea of the Seder plate, of the tray. The plate is nothing, it's empty, it's an empty plate. There's nothing on this plate. But when you fill the plate and you put on it a shenkpon, and you put on it an egg, and you put on it maror, and you put on it charosas, and you put on it vegetable, and you put on more maror, now you have a Seder experience. Now it becomes a tray that encompasses all the others and becomes a source of kingdom and dignity and malchus, etc. This is the final skill that we need to learn in our lives. Ability, sometimes I actually had to go to someone's home because a person is passing away, dying. I already visited this lady a few weeks ago, and today her son called me in the morning and said, we spoke a few weeks back, my mother is near the end, could you please come again to say prayers? So of course I went to the home. Now this particular woman, she has a plot in New York. Her husband is buried in New York, and her wishes and plans were to be buried in New York, and that's, God willing, in the right time, when God decides it's the time, God willing, she should be buried next to her husband. However, more the daughter-in-law than the son is very, very nervous and worried what will happen about traveling and what we don't know when it will be and what will happen. And right now there's flights, but it could be a little bit longer, and there might not be flights, and who knows if the country will shut down. She was very stressed out. So I tried to share with her this message, and I talked about it last night. I'm going to end with this because this is the most important message that we need right now. I don't know if anyone that's watching tonight watched last night and actually did this, but I did. So I'll speak for myself. Today I washed my hands numerous times. Many, many times I washed my hands. I didn't do it every time, but there were several times as I washed my hands that I meditated for a moment on what I talked about last night. The idea that we are in the hands of God. And that only when we let go of our ego, when we let go of our chametz, so we're talking about the difference between chametz and matzah. Chametz is ego and matzah is humility. When we let go of our ego and our feeling that we need to be in charge and we need to be in control and we need to know what's going to happen and we need to know, I didn't say this yesterday, but right now I should have been in Israel. I had a ticket, I had a group, we had a community, we were all scheduled to spend months planning and meeting, and we had an itinerary. And if I was in charge right now, I'll be in Caesarea or somewhere in Tel Aviv right now. Because of the time difference, I'd probably actually be sleeping somewhere in Tel Aviv right now. And that's where I plan to be. The only way to truly receive the blessings of God is when you're humble and you're open. Like a seed that can only begin to grow as a tree when the seed allows itself to be broken. As long as the seed is holding on to its little seed, it can't become a tree. So too is the life skill of the Seder plate. As long as you think that you have your own value, as long as you think it's all about me and you're not willing to be an open, empty vessel, willing to receive the Seder plate, is to be like Malchus. The beauty of the kingdom, the beauty of the kingship of Malchus is that it has nothing of its own. All that it has is that which it receives. And when it receives, then it's a king. We prepare our Seder plate. I'll remember the words of the Rashab when he made his Seder plate. And now we have the wagon. Out of the wagon. We're on a journey. And the driver is God. Let us be open like the Seder plate. Let us be open to receive wherever God takes us. Whatever is God's plan, God willing is that nobody we know should get sick. God willing, His plan should be that none of us are impacted and that 2 weeks or so, life should go back to normal. God willing. God is not like that. That people will, the country shut down and whatever. And when we accept, we have no fear. When we accept, we have no anxiety. We have no stress. Because like the Seder plate, we're open, we're empty, we're Malchus. Malchus is like the queen, the moon. The moon can reflect God, then we will also be beautiful. Good night, my dear friends. It's a pleasure having this virtual experience together. Be'ezrat Hashem. Tonight, 7:30 p.m., we will continue discussing the Seder experience together, me and you here, virtually united as one. God bless you. May God keep us all, healthy, and may every person who's a flama be completely healed with only good things. Good night.